Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the PinkUn promotion preview show. I think we're going to call this one. But yeah, we have got going. A few minutes late, but we're here now, and we'll be with you for the next 45 minutes or so to chat all things Norwich City. So get your questions, comments, thoughts in ahead of what is potentially a very big day for Norwich City tomorrow. Of course, promotion can happen either earlier in the afternoon, or we could all be waiting as we head to Carrow Road at 8 o'clock tomorrow for that game against Bournemouth. Paddy, nice to see you. Both got new haircuts this week, which I think we both agree.
Connor, that's why we were late. Let's be honest. We were just comparing who got sheared the worst, and it's probably me. Absolutely. So yeah, there you go.
Well, what I was going to say is probably long overdue for both of us, right? Because I mean, particularly at the sides, mine was. It's nice. It's been nice to see my ears again after a long absence. I'll tell you that. I think the last time I got my haircut was a few days before Christmas, so I was getting to sort of.
And Norwich was still top of the table. I bet, wasn't there? There's a segue for you, mate.
Exactly. So there you go. So there we go. If they lose at the weekend, then it's because we've both had haircuts, right? So so there we go. How are you doing, Pat? How are you? How much are you looking forward to tomorrow? You've obviously seen a few promotions in this job. Does this one feel, for obvious reasons, it's going to be different? But does this feel like a bigger achievement than perhaps others in the past?
Well, I mean, we'll get into that in due course, but that was put to Daniel this afternoon, previewing the Bournemouth game, and he felt principally because apart from a couple of pilots, there's been no fans inside the stadiums. It will go down as a bigger achievement, he feels, than 2 seasons ago under him. And I guess it's where your measure is. If you're coming at it from a period that we're living through that we've never lived through before and hopefully never do again, and then narrowly filter it into the business of football. Again, just a bizarre 12 months and a little bit more now since, the last Carrow Road full house was, I think, end of March, end of March, beating Leicester 1-0 in the Premier League. And with a fair wind, the next full house will be Norwich in the Premier League. And, bookending in between a season which might go down in terms of record-breaking, numbers in terms of points and clean sheets and da-da-da-da-da. So I think on balance, I've said it 2 or 3 times recently, it probably will be as big an achievement if you pull all those strands together. For me, personally, I'm happy to be proved wrong, but for me, it's probably the biggest achievement ever from any Norwich team because it's the off-the-field, epoch, almost epic set of circumstances which we never want to go through again. And then on the field, it's the level of performance that they've proved. 90 points at this stage with 5 games to go is ridiculous. And for me, yeah, I think it does top any promotion, certainly any that I've covered. And it is just sad that tomorrow night, and Daniel touched on this earlier today, we've put the quotes up on PinkUn, have a look, very, very impassioned, sort of almost thanking the fans and dedicating, hopefully, this achievement to the fans, that, his mind goes back to series of moments this season when, wow, wouldn't it have been great to have fans in? Mario Vrancic, you referenced a couple of late winners at Carrow Road. The Huddersfield 7-goal game, what a full house would have made of that. And then obviously last week, pulling onto 90 points, as he said, in the normal times, that there'd been a full away end at Derby and they could have savoured that. And sadly tomorrow, that will be the sad element to it, that if they get the job done, whether it's through their own efforts or earlier in the day with what Brentford and Swansea don't do, there won't be any fans live to see it. And that is the enduring sadness underpinning what looks like an historic campaign.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's kind of the missing factor. And I've asked a few fans this week in terms of, yes, it's an epic achievement, like all the things you listed there in terms of potentially being record breaking, but is it tinged with sadness because fans can't be there? Do you view it as kind of being a good thing that's been able to continue without sort of fans in because it's offered a little bit of normality? It's a difficult balance. I think most fans probably sit between the two, but yeah, like you say, certainly going to be a different experience. It's going to be interesting, I think, if it is done tomorrow, and I'll map out all the various permutations in a moment or two. And there's the league table, as you can see, looking very healthy for Norwich. It is going to be interesting to see the level of celebration, but equally how they sustain it without that natural energy and without that crowd to kind of enjoy it with, because I think we've seen after some big victories this season, it's been kind of high fives and and a few hugs, and then everyone sort of trudges down the tunnel, and that's it. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. So as you can see there, Norwich City top of the Championship, 90 points. They need 92 to clinch promotion back to the Premier League, on the basis that both Swansea and Brentford win tomorrow. Swansea at home to Wycombe Wanderers, so you would expect them to pick up a victory, and Brentford play Millwall as well. They both play at 12:30. If both of them drop points, then Norwich City will be promoted before they even have to kick a ball against fifth place Bournemouth, as you can see at 8 o'clock. If, as perhaps we expect, and certainly as Daniel Farker expects speaking to him today, and one of them or both of them win or get a point or whatever, then it will be down to Norwich to do it on the pitch at Carrow Road at 8 o'clock later that evening. Of course, those fixtures moved for the funeral of Prince Philip, which is at 3. So by 2:30, we'll have a good idea of where we stand. Pad, as we sit here now, of those various sort of permutations that we've mapped out there, are you kind of looking at, I'm looking especially at Swansea's fixture, a home game against Wycombe, who are, albeit they've been in good form recently, relatively good form for a team at the bottom of the table, but equally they're the bottom of their league. So the expectation is that Swansea should probably win that one. And Millwall, who, even though started pretty brightly against Swansea last weekend, ended up losing 3-0. So 2 games that you would say that suit probably Brentford and Swansea tomorrow. So is the expectation that we're going to be arriving at Carrow Road tomorrow with Norwich City having to sort of secure it on the pitch?
Well, sorry to put you on the spot here, Connor, but what scenario would Norwich need if Brentford drop points but Swansea win?
The max Brentford can get. So if Brentford draw, that would mean the maximum they can get is 90 points. So Norwich, that would be enough theoretically for a draw to be enough, because of obviously the game in hand. So Norwich could draw against Bournemouth, providing Brentford don't win. So if Swansea win and Brentford draw, Norwich could be promoted with a draw, if that makes sense.
Yeah. See, that to me is, I just think, because that's obviously a London derby. We haven't quite gone down low enough there. Well done, Tony. But I don't think Millwall are quite out of it. I think they're probably more or less out of it in terms of the playoffs. But certainly the London derby angle, I'm sure they'd like to put a spoke in the wheel. So I can conceivably see Brentford dropping to points, actually, and I think Swansea will beat Wycombe, which would mean, Norwich turn up tomorrow night, need a draw, and if they need a draw, then get the party started, I think, in a socially distanced and responsible manner, I might add.
Yeah, hang on, I might have done my maths wrong here, I think Brentford would be...
all that hair you've chopped off, mate.
It's not... My maths isn't the strongest point. Tony's just mapped out here for us. I think Brentford would get 89 points, so drop point. So if Brentford draw but Swansea win, then Norwich would still need a draw, wouldn't they? I think because Swansea would still be able to get 90 points. So I'm technically right. I've just worked it out wrong. But there we go. Anyway, that would be enough. That would be enough. But if Brentford win and Swansea win, Norwich need to win. That's the situation as it is. But we shall see. So there you go. There's the league table. Very good reading if you're a Norwich fan. I've probably confused loads of people with the various permutations there, but all good. Pad, Emi Buendia, let's start with him. He has been past fit for this weekend. Clearly a massive boost. I guess the interesting point is that this swollen ankle is reoccurring. It probably suggests maybe the methods that opponents are using to prevent him, given that they're struggling to tackle him in a fair way, I suppose.
Well, they're probably just too slow for his dancing feet. He's gone before you see it, and the ball's gone with him. But they're just managing to catch, on this occasion, his right ankle on quite numerous occasions. And I mean, Daniel said today it's behind him. There's no issues now that he's had a, best part of a week to sort of recover and rehab it. But you do feel that if it's one of those, that there's obviously some sort of damage in that area of his right ankle that probably is going to need the summer to really, properly put it behind him, because, I'd imagine if he gets a kick on it tomorrow, it'll be just as painful as it was at Preston, as it was at Derby. But, Daniel was certainly very positive. I've seen a little bit of Insta from Emi earlier in the week where he's obviously converted his gym, hasn't he? He's got the old full-on weights and barbells in his garage, so and he seemed to be having a serious workout, so that tells me his ankle's pretty decent nick if he can do that. So it sounds positive. It sounds positive, but I just think moving forward, and obviously that's a whole different kettle of fish in terms of his Emi Buendia, a Norwich player beyond the summer, but I think he probably now there's probably a lot of wear and tear on that young man, and are probably at his feet up for 2 or 3 months. Because we have to remember, they didn't really have much of a summer last summer, did they? So it feels like it's almost been 2 seasons stitched together, really, to a large extent. And there's a lot of players who've played a lot of minutes in the last 2 seasons, as it will be now, and he's certainly one of them. So, yeah, I think it's probably managing it for the remaining 5 games and then a bit of rest, and hopefully then that's the end of that.
Someone that won't be managing their injury, Lucas Rupp. It sounds like, or it sounded like to me, if they probably could have rushed him back maybe for the final couple of games if needed. But I think given how long this injury has been affecting him for, and it's essentially a re-injury to the same hamstring, which I think is always a concern. 5 weeks, the timescale on that is better for Norwich City to wait and make sure he's right for pre-season, isn't it? I noticed on his Instagram today he put see you next season at Carrow Road in the Premier League, so he's feeling fairly confident. But he's someone that's not going to make it. But it did sound a little bit more positive on Christoph Zimmermann and his progress.
He did, yeah. Although the timescale was still, I thought, really reading back the quotes, pretty much what he said all along, that with a fair wind, he could get back for the final game, maybe 2 games from the end. He's back in doing a bit of rehab work now, but I mean, he also caveated it a little bit like you mapped out there, Connor, with Lucas Rupp, that if it isn't this season, then he'll be in great shape for going into pre-season and then the Premier League. So, Daniel kind of danced around this topic of is the mind shifting ever so slightly towards the summer and the Premier League and planning for that today, and he's obviously loath, publicly to say that is the case. But you just think the way they're looking at Rupp's sort of rehab, the way they're sort of treating maybe Zimmermann as well. If it's at all possible, I can see those 2 lads basically just being allowed to more or less come back fit and firing for the summer and beyond, because there isn't any real need. I mean, obviously, maybe centre back area. We all know Ben Gibson's unavailable, so maybe there is more of a pressing urgency. But young Omabama Daly's coming in, and alongside a man possessed in Hanley, they look pretty secure to me. Certainly with what Norwich need to do, which might not actually be anything of their own efforts tomorrow, as we've mapped out earlier. So I don't see the need to rush Zimmermann back. And of course, Rupp, well, if Ollie Skip and Kenny McLean stay fit, then they play. So for those reasons, I think as much as Daniel quite clearly is saying the job's still not quite done and doesn't want to talk up too much about next season, I think with those 2 players, I think we're starting to see that there is a realisation that they need to start or accelerate the planning for the Premier League, I think.
We'll get into a few questions and bits and bobs at the moment. People pointing out that if Brentford fail to win, then essentially the difference in goal difference between Norwich and Swansea is so great that effectively it would be done anyway. But we're talking fully mathematically. Norwich would, of course, still require that point to gain promotion. We'll hear from Daniel Farker in a second on the impact of supporters and how proud he is, I suppose, of Norwich fans for their efforts at staying at home and whatnot and following the guidelines. Of course, that there are going to be people allowed for the first time in ages to watch a Norwich game in pub gardens and stuff like that, which is maybe quite nice because of the celebration. Maybe that's why they decided not to do it against Derby, for example. You never know. In terms of this season, we kind of spoke about this at the start. When fans reflect on this, is that going to take the gloss off a little bit? The fact that this Norwich side has been so dominant, I'm sure people watching along will tell us as well. Yeah. Will that take the gloss off in 5-10 years when people reflect on this Norwich team as being very, very dominant, but equally people weren't there to see it? Is that going to take the gloss off a little bit, do you feel, compared to maybe 2 years ago where everyone was riding a wave?
Well, to be honest, Connor, I think we're probably better throwing it open, and like maybe Tony can flow through the comments. It'd be great to get, because ultimately, we're in a privileged position. We are allowed to go into the games. We haven't had that disconnect really to a degree. Certainly not to the extent where supporters have not been allowed in. A lucky few. Was it the Preston game, Sheffield Wednesday? I think there was another one. Forest, was it?
Forest, Cardiff.
Yeah, Cardiff as well. Yeah. So, and that was your lot. So, in the main, the vast majority of Norwich fans, season ticket holders, have not been able to experience it firsthand. And from my personal point of view, I'd imagine it's got easier as this year of pandemic has unfolded purely in terms of watching football, because you just get used to it. We've, in a different sort of sense, got used to actually turning up at games and there's no fans in there. Daniel Farker has spoken about that. Players have spoken about that. I saw Roy Hodgson interviewed a month or so back saying it's dangerous because it does feel normal now, which you never want that to be the case. Empty stadia, such an alien, sterile environment. But I think for me, it probably would have been more going back 12 months now in the March, April time when, football was still potentially going on until obviously then it paused until we restarted the Project Restart. I'd imagine then, and we had pieces with fans who talked quite movingly, I thought, about, it isn't just, as we know, it isn't just going on a Saturday or every other Saturday and sitting there for 90 minutes and watching your team kick a ball. It's almost the social aspect and people's mental health and that interaction with people who you've whether it's family or friends or whoever, or the people you have got to know over the years from sitting in the same seat in the Lower Barclay or whatever. It's to be denied that, I'd imagine at the outset of this would have been horrendous, really, in a footballing context. What's Stephen got to say? Yeah, there you go. The beers will flow. Yeah, I think ultimately your point for me is in 5 or 10 years. No, I think this will stand the test of time alongside any other achievement in terms of a Norwich side coming out of the Championship and hopefully winning the title, because people will probably focus for me more on the numbers and the statistics, and they will stand testament with any other season. But I think in the here and the now, and maybe in the next couple of seasons, there will always be that hollow sense because fans have been denied that kind of real time experience. I mean, yes, they can watch games remotely, they can follow our content, they can listen to Chrissy Gorham and the boys on Norfolk, but it isn't the same if you're used to going to Carrow Road, is it, or going away from home? So, but I'd be really interested how the fans see that. Will this achievement be seen as anything different in maybe 5 or 10 years' time?
There is, of course, the factor that it could be the reverse of that. Fans could look at it as more impressive because of that factor. But I'm talking in terms of connection to this team. When you think about 2 years ago and the connection and community people had with Christoph Zimmermann, Marco Stiepermann, those players individually, there's a real possibility that maybe some Norwich fans won't even see Ollie Skip play, or in the flesh at least. So, yeah, it's very surreal. Anyway, let's hear what Daniel Farker had to say. We'll read Jim's comment first. Do you think the players have played differently without fans? No groans or impatience as much as cheers and clapping, although it lacks atmosphere. Is the pressure off? I'll throw that in your direction, Pad, and then we'll go to Daniel Farker.
That's an interesting point. I mean, both, I would say, possibly. But, different players probably react differently to not having a crowd there and the sort of buzz that brings. So I think it probably would have evened itself out. Yes, that's a fair point in terms of games but I mean, let's be honest, how many games have Norwich not performed really to the extent where the fans would have got on their backs? Very few, I think. And the reverse is true. You look at the league table, 90 points, more wins than any other team, clean sheets, best defensive record. The lack of almost getting driven on by your fan base, that hasn't materially impinged Norwich. So you'd have to say it hasn't really impacted in that narrow sense. Of course, as Daniel said today, we'll probably just listen to the clip now. It does take something away, and that sense of being able to celebrate with your fan base has been denied players, coaches and supporters. So, yeah, there will forevermore be something missing this season, but clearly, ultimately, if Norwich go up with a record points total, it hasn't detrimentally impacted them on the pitch, has it?
No, absolutely. And we'll come to your questions in a minute, because I can already see we've got loads flooding through, which is excellent. If you've got any to add to that, stick them in the comments down below and we'll come to them. But here's Daniel Farker and a very personal message to supporters at his press conference today.
It is different, and of course also disappointment is there as well, that we're not allowed to celebrate with our supporters. But I also got the feeling, so it doesn't take anything away from this success. So it makes it perhaps even a bit more valuable, because I think also can't be that selfish, just think about our success and how important it is for the club, and also from the financial point of view or something like this, but also about that also our community and all the people went through such a difficult period with this pandemic. And there are many worries about the future, about the financial future, with the families, about the jobs and something like this, about the health and really difficult time. And to give them also some joy with winning football games, with achieving something amazing, I think this makes this promotion perhaps even a bit more valuable. Perhaps not in the moment when you can celebrate, because the celebration is not the same without the supporters, but in general, I got the feeling perhaps this promotion would be even more valuable in comparison to other years, because it was such a strange time for all human beings. And in this moment, I think it's also yet you have to think about the responsibility to play football for the people, to represent the yellow shirt, to make them proud, to give them some distraction, also to bring joy to them in order to also help them to come through this difficult period. I'm pretty sure then they appreciate this and will help us also do some difficult periods that they will come for us probably in some games also in the next season. But in general, I also got the feeling there will be also the moment when we can appreciate the success and we can celebrate together, perhaps not in this weeks, but perhaps in a few weeks' time when the situation is much better. I'm pretty sure then our keeper will also find a way to celebrate and to savor what we have achieved. And we'll do this, that's definitely for sure.
There you go, Daniel Farke on Norwich City's imminent promotion. You can read more of his quotes from today's press conference, PinkUn.com, to do check that out. Let's delve into some of your comments and questions. Dubai Canary has kicked us off by saying, let us salute the champions-elect on the eve of a great achievement. Flint has just said OTBC. Let's see what else we've got here. Toby said hello. Kevin, stuff Bournemouth OTBC with some yellow and green hearts. Good to see. And then Flint has asked a question. It's a question that is probably quite familiar to some Norwich fans. Jordan Rhodes has hit form, and I believe in the last year at Sheffield Wednesday. Would you take him as a squad player for the season in the Premier League? I feel like it's one we've answered throughout this season and probably last season as well, Pad. But I think we're probably both in agreement that the Jordan Rhodes ship has sailed.
Absolutely, Connor. Yeah, no, that won't be happening. He's, Premier League level. Look at his career; he didn't really cut it. I take the point as a squad player, but then what is that saying to Adam Eder? Because he's probably going to be in your squad mix, and I think ultimately Jordan Hugel's there as well. And I think they will look to do it. They were linked with his name escapes me, the top scorer in the Eredivisie there about a week or so ago. Larry's ripping it up at VVW Venlo, wasn't it? Greek international. Now whether there's any,
you're not going to have a go at his name.
I've totally forgot it, mate, to be honest. Yeah. I could find it. If I was speaking to you, I'll just call it up on our stories. But anyway, the Greek chap, whether there's any veracity to that, time will tell. But that, to me, does make a lot of sense, that level of attacking reinforcement to take some of the burden off the greatest. So, I don't think, I know it won't be Jordan Rhodes. And good luck to him that he's, don't know if it's a coincidence. He's coming to the end of his contract at Sheffield Wednesday and he suddenly started banging in goals. And he probably will get a move off the back of that, but it won't be to the Premier League. I think them days have gone for that, man. Yeah,
and best wishes to Darren Moore as well, who's contracted pneumonia, I think, after catching COVID. So hopefully he comes through that. Toby, before he jetted off for his tea, has asked the question: what game do you think we will win the title? I think mathematically it can be done against Watford. If Norwich win both games, I think, I've not double checked, but I think that would be enough to win the title, wouldn't it?
That is correct, Connor. But I can see it being QPR, which is the following game after Watford, for the simple reason that I'm at a family wedding, so you can guarantee it'll be that game. So that's my theory. But that would also, I think, 6 points from probably aside from Norwich, the two informed teams in the division. It's a tall order. It's doable, obviously, clearly, but you just think with all the hullabaloo that's around these games, maybe draw one of those, maybe win one, and if so, then probably rolls on to QPR and West London for the promotion title pie. Sorry, not the promotion pie, title pie.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a couple of comments for you, Pad, asking about Coventry's win last night against Rotherham. Fairly big one. I don't know if you caught it on the TV. I watched a bit of it, and Sam
McCallum playing left hand side of the defence, mate, looked decent. I thought, yeah. We've had plenty of questions about it on these platforms before. A little bit like Jordan Rhodes, probably the Premier League is a bridge too far at this stage of his career, but he certainly looks. Looking at him there, physically, he looks like he can handle Championship football. And I would think, there was talk about Sinani maybe will come back and they'll try and position him towards the top end of the Championship loan club. For me, that's probably where Sam McCallum needs to go now next season. I don't, Yanulis is going to be the main man. Obviously, there's a question mark with Byram. But if Byram's available, then, for me, he would be Yanulis' backup and go let Sam McCallum get a decent, top 10 sort of scale Championship club. Because I think he certainly looks like he's probably a little bit better than Cov, dare I say, who hopefully will be in the Championship next season. So, yeah, that was a big result. But sadly, that probably pushes Paul Warne and Rotherham back towards League One, I think. I think they might. I mean, it's quite tight down there, I know. But you just think if they can't beat Cov at home last night, that's mentally going to be quite tough for them to pick themselves up. So it looks like maybe Warne is heading back to League One. But thankfully, Cov hopefully is staying in the Championship. And it's big for Cov because they go back to the Rico next season, which is obviously, we could have another 3 pods to talk about playing at various outposts, but thankfully they're going to go back there as a Championship side, hopefully, and that's big for Cov, definitely.
This isn't a Coventry podcast, so I don't want to dwell on it too much. But
if you want to take it in that direction, I'll make Rich.
Well, I didn't think you mind, but I was just going to say I saw something a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how much credibility it had about potentially Birmingham playing at the Rico as well, because as you know, there's a few stands at St Andrews that are out of order, which would be quite a strange kind of situation, I suppose, wouldn't it? But we shall see. I think they need a win, don't they, Coventry, and they will be they'll be there. Dave Howe on Facebook has said, "How can we celebrate as fans when we achieve promotion? Will they arrange something after May?" Paddy, what's your kind of view and your take on this?
Well, I mean, following on from what Daniel said, I mean, that clip we played out there, that he said he was fairly confident that the club would put a plan in place to mark the promotion / title. Now, whether that's, but obviously a lot of this is still woven around where we are in terms of, pre-season and moving into next season in terms of, unlocking and the progression of the roadmap that the government have set out. If we get to a position where you can get a substantial amount of people in one space, and whether that's, the vaccine rollout or COVID passports or whatever, to enable that to do it, I'm sure the club would be very proactive, as they were as soon as they were allowed to do the pilots. They were there. They were in the front rank in terms of the Football League. They wanted to be leading from the front. And the reality is Norwich had, when those pilots were getting rolled out, Norwich had a deliverable plan in their view to have had 16,000, 1-6 at Carrow Road in that period. So, the plans are there. They feel they can deliver that scale of events safely, but ultimately they are, as has been proven all season, sort of beholden to whatever public health and the government and obviously the footballing bodies decide is the appropriate way forward. But yeah, I've got no doubt in my mind. Obviously, it's probably going to be virtual, the virtual space for the immediate aftermath in the weeks ahead and the days and weeks ahead, because that's the way it has to be. But thereafter, you would hope if we get into a position where maybe towards the back end of pre-season, start of next season, we're allowed to sort of get sizable numbers of fans into stadia, then to me, I think Norwich would probably try and do something along those lines. Whether I don't know, hypothetically, could you do the final Carrow Road friendly maybe the week before the season, make that a bit of a promotion title winning type party? I don't know. I'm just throwing that idea out there. But yeah, there's no doubt they will want to mark the achievement in the physical space as much as the virtual. I'm sure about that.
Yeah, and of course we'll have plenty of content and stuff once it does get confirmed. As for I think I mentioned this on Terrace Talk as well, but the plan is to have a live show again on Sunday of Terrace Talk. We'll get plenty of Norwich fans on, so if anyone watching fancies it, then do get in touch. But that is provisionally planned for 7:00. But if they lose tomorrow, then completely forget I said anything. Neil Lufa has simply asked best Norwich side ever.
What, question mark? Yeah.
Question mark. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You're getting into a thorny area of debate there, aren't you? Because
should we change that question? Best Norwich side ever at this level? Is that probably a better question to ask?
Yeah, I mean, really, what would be the runners and riders? I mean, we're testing the memory banks here. We're going back to that side in the Brown side of the 80s, and was it Saunders' side? Did they win promotion from Division 2 early in the 70s? It's very hard, isn't it, for people in the modern era to sort of comparatively, but I guess that's where the stats will come into play. If you want to settle a barroom argument, and if this Norwich vintage, when the season's finished, if they're points per game, allowing for the 3 points, 2 points back in the day, the difference in the amount of games played, but you can work out a mean average. For me, if this Norwich side have got the best, then they were the best ever in the second tier in Norwich's history. I don't think you can dispute it. Now, then it becomes a little bit more subjective, and fans will have their own favourites from different eras. But I think ultimately, to settle that argument, you probably just do have to crunch a few numbers. So you're probably not the best man for the job there, Connor.
No, I get them wrong. Yeah, it's not for me. I don't think.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting at the press conference today that Daniel Farke, despite kind of all the questions on promotion, he kind of felt there were three sort of boxes that he wanted to tick before the end of the season, which of course one would be promotion, the first one, then winning the title, and then actually surpassing that 94 points. And he said it throughout this season, hasn't he? That being the desire. And Tim Krul, quotes on our website as well, has done an interview reiterating that the fact the squad want to be considered as Norwich's best ever side at this level. So certainly in terms of points return, there's an opportunity for them to do that if they can amass more than 4 points in the final 5 games, which they're certainly on course to do if you look at points per game and all of that. Darren Gascoigne, rather, on Facebook has said, what do you think of Daniel Farke being linked to Eintracht Frankfurt? This was an interesting link that came up during the week. I try to forget what day, they all merge into one, but I'm sure you saw it on our website. Eintracht Frankfurt, of course, that's a soon-to-be vacancy after their manager, Adi Hunter, has agreed to become Borussia Mönchengladbach manager after their boss, Marco Rosa, is set to take over at Dortmund. So a little bit of a chain reaction, so to speak. But that is going to be a job that's available this summer. They're currently in 4th position in the Bundesliga. A fairly comfortable cushion now over Dortmund as well. So looks like they're pretty close to securing Champions League football. Possibly a bit of a rebuild, given the sporting director Bobic, I think his last name is, leaving to join Hertha Berlin, and he's made comments in 2018 when speculation around Daniel Farke in this post came up, saying that Daniel Farke was a manager they had their eye on. So probably something to this story, Pad. But ultimately, Daniel Farke has said and reiterated today he honours his contracts and didn't look like a man that's about to go back on his word.
No, I don't think this is an opportunity that will result in him leaving. But it pops into my head that you're talking a 4th in the Bundesliga, so very good chance of getting into the Champions League. Stuart Webber has always maintained Daniel will go on and coach a team in the Champions League, so there is that. But ultimately, if the sporting director is also moving on as well, I mean, you could almost draw a parallel with him coming in on the ticket with Stuart Webber in 2017. Now, heaven forbid, hopefully Frankfurt aren't looking for a new sporting director and looking in Norfolk either, because that would be a double whammy. But no, I don't. The planets won't align. Daniel is true. He's never broken a contract. He didn't sound like a man today. He was considering that. He was pretty clear. He doesn't really want to be drawn on any speculation about himself. He's quite happy and feels on occasion he has to get involved with when it's Max Aarons or Wendy or whoever. But when it comes to his future, he was quite quick to shut that one down. I mean, what I would say is I did see a few reports, whether it was the original report saying that he had a break clause. That isn't the case. Yeah. There's no break clause. It's not. It gets to the end of the season and he's still 12 months left on his his second Carrow deal. But there's some sort of break or grace period. That isn't the case. So if that isn't the case, which it isn't, and you've got a man who likes to reiterate he's never walked away from a contract in his coaching career, then I think it's an open and shut case. He won't be leaving this summer. He will see out his next year. But of course, we've got into it on here before, and we will do in greater depth as we move forward. Get used to it, because these stories will continue to surface around him, around Stuart as well, because they are essentially, you want to draw a parallel with a football player, entering the final 12 months of their deal. And if you had a highly coveted, dare I say it, Enemi Buendia, 12 months out from his contract ending, you'd be looking to probably have to shift him on in this window, because you're not going to get the true value for that player. Slightly different in terms of there's no real transfer fee when we're talking about the futures of Webber and Farke, but in terms of their absolutely intrinsic importance to what they've built and what they're trying to build further down the line, it has to be a concern, because until it's definitively put away and we know that they're either staying here or they're definitely going to go, but there's a plan in place and here is the plan, then every time there is a link like this, and there will be more this summer, as Daniel said 2 seasons ago, with the same achievement in his back pocket, a championship and a title win. He had plenty of offers to go back to Germany, but he wanted clearly to have a crack at the Premier League. And I'm sure that is his mindset still this time around, because he must feel he has unfinished business. But there'll be no shortage of interest, because there's a guy who's in arguably the toughest league in the world, has potentially got 2 promotions and titles in his back pocket in 2 attempts. That marks him out as a pretty special coach. And then you add in the style of play and the type of football he plays. his faith in youth and his willingness to buy into that. He's a very prized commodity, and sadly for Norwich, there will be other interest, no doubt, this summer. And you just hope, as he talked so powerfully, I thought earlier about the fans, he's talked about the opportunity and the gratitude he feels to Norwich, and this is his second home outside Germany. You just hope those ties remain strong for at least the final year of his contract, because there'll be enough upheaval probably in terms of the playing squad this summer, ins and outs. We don't need to add to that with the head coach. So I don't see it. I don't see Frankfurt, and I don't really see, unless it's something out of this world that comes into his lap, I don't see him actively looking to leave Norwich this summer. But the problem is, even if he stays and he's here on the opening day of next season in the Premier League, if there's no new contract signed and sealed, then we're going to continue to have to back this topic away until it's definitively resolved one way or the other.
Yeah, part of me feels that maybe he's waiting for Stuart Webber to definitively make a decision. I know that Stuart said before that this, in his view, this contract is his last. But of course, you don't know how the pandemic or any success potentially that Norwich City have or failure have next season in the Premier League, just how that'll impact it. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch. But yeah, as I wrote in the piece analysing this morning, uncertainty just allows that speculation to grow that little bit more, doesn't it? So it's going to be interesting to see how it transpires. We'll delve into a few more comments, and then we'll go to Daniel Farker again, speaking about the future of Ollie Skipp, another sort of asset that Norwich City fans are desperate to keep ahead of next season. A fresh report, I don't know exactly who it was, has come out today, very similar to those that we've seen before in terms of Spurs being willing to give him an opportunity. So we'll come to that in a moment. A few more comments though. Max Edmonds on Facebook has said, draw 1-1 tomorrow and turn over Watford live on Sky 3-0 to be made champions. Neil Lufa has said the joys of VAR for next season, which every time that's kind of commented, that image of Teemu Pukki against Spurs comes into my mind, and just when you think you're over that and it doesn't make you angry anymore, it definitely still does. Rams review praising my haircut. Thank you very much, guys. Some Derby fans who are having it tough at the moment, so thank you very much. They were on Terrace Talk a couple of weeks ago. Keith Shaw has reminded you of the name, although I think it was Georgius, the first name. So there you go, Pat, if you want to have a crack at that, as we were talking about.
Well, you're forgetting I am a Greek-speaking expert, as was proved.
This is very true.
So if Yanulis was a Y, then presumably this is Giacomakis. I'll retract that I'm an expert after that pronunciation. But and it's definitely not Georgia. No, Georgius Giacomakis. I can see something of that nature, because the figures that were being talked about would certainly come into Norwich's wheelhouse. I think, doing it from memory now, I think he was entering the final 12 months of his reported current contract. So, as we've just talked about, in terms of Norwich hold the whip hand with certain players this summer because they're on longer contracts, that club in Holland must be fearing that they're going to probably have to part with a guy who's absolutely scored a ridiculous amount of goals per games in the Dutch top division, but below his market value. But if you're Norwich and you're looking for a striker possibly to come in and take some of the load off Hugill and mainly Teemu Pukki, I think that would be a very good addition, that type of player, because he's scoring goals in the top tier in Holland. He comes with hopefully his injury record is a bit better than Josip Dermich's, is all I'm going to say, because he had a decent scoring record in the top tier in Germany. We know how that one panned out. So maybe we'll have to go back and look at his injury record, but certainly that ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah, so I would keep that one on the back burner in terms of potential striker targets.
Yeah, absolutely. We will watch as the summer accelerates towards us. Just seeing what else we've got here before we go to that Ollie Skipp clip. Michael Garwood on Facebook, I think we'll beat Bournemouth convincingly. Better team and a better manager. We'll get promoted in style. 4-1 win. Very emphatic. He's predicting there. Max Edmonds, again, a follow-up question. Can you see Todd Cantwell staying next season? And will Marco Stiepermann be here next season? So two different players, and this is the last question before we go into that Farker clip that I've promised. Two players probably have played different kind of roles this season. Obviously, Stiepermann's been battling that virus that people haven't really been able to diagnose, but then eventually Epstein-Barr virus was given the name given. Although Marcus Stiepermann said in the program, they're still fairly recently they're still not entirely sure what it was precisely. Maybe because of obviously coronavirus and the impact of contracting that. And I think he had glandular fever as well. So he's had a rough 12 months. But on those two players, Pat, how do you kind of see this summer going? Do you still think there'll be Norwich City players come the start of the Premier League next year?
At this stage, I don't think you can say for definite. But ultimately, I'll repeat what I just said. Cantwell is under a reasonably decent. Is it? I think there's another year, and then City have an option. I think off the top of my head. So, it isn't the scenario where they need to get rid this summer. But ultimately, whether it's him, whether it's Aarons, whether it's Buendia, Webber is very clear that when the planets align and all parties want something to happen, then as long as Norwich are going to get what they feel is the value of a player, these deals can happen. Ben Godfrey, the example before him, James Maddison, Jamal to a lesser extent. But so ultimately, in terms of Todd, will there be the sufficient interest in terms of firm interest? Because there was a lot of talk, and it's pertinent we're talking about Bournemouth because the reverse fixture was the game him and Buendia were left out of earlier in the season, and Daniel came into his post-match after that 1-0 defeat and cited a lack of focus around the transfer speculation. So, but that's all it was in terms of Todd Cantwell. There was no firm offers, absolutely none whatsoever, received by Norwich City last summer for that young man. So there might be a lot of talk again around him in the summer to come. But if there isn't somebody picking up the phone to Stuart Webber and matching what Norwich's valuation is, then he will still remain a Norwich player. I think with him, more likely would be maybe if he starts in the fashion he started in the Premier League 2 seasons ago, and he's absolutely, eye-catching, scoring goals against the Chelseas of this world, then you could see then, because he's obviously showing again that, he's not just a very, very good Championship player, but he has the potential to be a very good Premier League player. I think some clubs would probably have a look at him then in a more serious manner rather than, putting a report that's linking him to X or Y. So, but no, I don't necessarily see him going, and Marco definitely not, unless the only scenario I see with him is he hasn't played a lot of football this season for obvious reasons that you mapped out there. Does he want another crack at the Premier League? But then if he's not playing regularly, we see how Dowell has picked up the mantle and ran with it. If they make another signing or two in that area of the pitch, that might push him further down the pecking order. Does he feel that maybe there's an opportunity for him to go back potentially to Germany with his young family and pick up his career there? So, but from Norwich's point of view, I'm pretty sure Daniel would want to keep him here because he is a very popular figure around the camp. He has shown at Championship level he can have an impact in the right scenarios. Question marks against him in the Premier League. So really for me with Marco, it's, is he happy to be on board sort of thing? He's contracted beyond next season, isn't he? So, there's no issue in terms of, will he have a contract here? He will be here next season contractually. So for me, long-winded way of saying, I think they'll both probably be here when the ball kicks off in the Premier League next season. But of the two, I could see Cantwell going before Sleeperman, definitely, yeah. But not this summer. I just don't see it. I think the one who will go will be Max Aarons. So that's the top and bottom of it. And we don't need to get into that because we'll have another podcast about that. But clearly, I think to meet Stuart Webber's test of a player outgrows the club, I think he probably has by the end of this season outgrown Norwich because, what more is there for him to prove? Yeah, okay, he could play his part in the Norwich team staying up, but with the greatest respect, there's probably bigger fish in the Premier League who would want Max Aarons now, and that's not even before you get into overseas clubs. So, I think they'll probably lose Aarons, and of course, if they lose him, that probably then reinforces or lessens the desire then for them to have to lose a Cantwell or Buendia because, financially, not that they need to sell this summer, but if they were to bank 30 plus for Max Aarons, then there's even less of an incentive to cash in on some of the other crown jewels. So no, for me, I think it'll be Max out the door and maybe Todd staying, but who knows? It's a long summer ahead, mate.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I can certainly foresee that situation that you've mapped out there in terms of Aarons being the one that exits. And then, of course, if he does, you've got to manage, I guess, the messaging that you're trying to send out. If you're selling Aarons and Buendia, then you're not necessarily sending the best message out to your fan base, I guess, would be the argument. But yeah, I think he's definitely outgrown the club. But one player who isn't contracted to Norwich City and won't definitely be at the club at the start of next season, Oliver Skipp, of course, on loan from Spurs. Various reports floating about that they're going to take a look at him in pre-season. Why wouldn't they? He's been excellent this season. Here's what Daniel Farke had to say on his future today.
Yes, like I mentioned, so I don't want to speak too much in details about our plans. The most important topic is right now that at this moment, Oliver is with us. He plays a key role for us and is quite important. And we're happy that we have him. We're happy that we have him also for the upcoming 5 games. And we want to be as successful as possible with this group of players. And then once the dust is settled, once we are really promoted, then it's also possible to speak about in personal terms about some other topics, but not before. I also fully respect that Oliver is a player of Tottenham. We are really thankful and grateful that we were allowed to have him for this 1 year, and we will see what the future will bring.
There you go, Daniel Farker on Ollie Skip. Pad, simple question: have you voted for your player of the season yet? Are you going to be voting?
No, I won't, mate. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to compromise. Plus, I'm not a Norwich fan, so it's probably not appropriate. I'll throw that one back at you, Connor. Who have you voted for?
Well, I haven't actually voted. I mean, I've kind of made the case for Emi Buendia, so that's who my vote would go to. And I'm sure Tony will flick up some various comments of who people are going to be voting for. But if you were going to cast your vote, where would you be throwing it? I guess for their efforts this season.
You know, there's some absolutely outstanding candidates. So just seeing Grant Hanley there, I wouldn't disagree with him in terms of the conversation. Buendia, obviously. Max, yeah, maybe. But Skippy would be in there, of course. And the GOAT, the GOAT, if you wanted to give him another extension to his mantelpiece. But Buendia for me all day long, mate. Yeah, I mean, his numbers are ridiculous now. And, it's not just the numbers he's offering. It's how he exponentially improves the players around him at the attacking end of the pitch. You take him out of that side, they're a different side, they're an inferior side. So Tyler's calling it best he's ever seen in a Norwich shirt. Some candidates there, but it'd be just great to see him in a Premier League side going forward, because ultimately there was a bit of a bright 2 months at the start of the last season, and then it tailed off alarmingly, and his performance levels did, as did the rest of his team. But if Norwich get into a nice groove and sort of no real issues behind them in terms of going down, it'd be great with that sort of lesser pressure on their shoulders to see what he could do in the Premier League, because there's no doubt he's got the talent. It's just whether he can be as dominant as he is in a Championship as he could be in a Premier League, because you would think he has the ability to do it and time on his side as well.
There you go. Thanks to Norwich City's head of comms for the compliments on the haircuts. I appreciate that. There you go. A few more comments. I'm with you, by the way, on Buendia. I think his ability is probably closer to Europa League, dare I say, Champions League level than Football League level. It's I've said this numerous times, but it's a real travesty, not from a Norwich perspective that he's playing in this level, but certainly in terms of his career. A few comments on what we were discussing earlier. Flint has said, without social media for clubs to easily reach out to fans and vloggers and people like us, I suppose, would be thrown in there as well, perhaps. It would have been a lot worse and felt less connected. Neil Lufer, watch-alongs and social media have helped along with iFollow, but sad the new players haven't experienced the fans and atmosphere at Carrow Road. Has it helped the youngsters when making their debuts? See what else we have got here. Someone complimenting our work, which is very nice. Thank you. We haven't even paid them for that, Pad, so that's good. Thank you very much.
Not Mrs. Stuff, is it, mate? It's not your mother.
No, not on this account. Although the well at the end, I'll distance myself from. Certainly no one that is related to me, I don't think. Stephen Noakes, Connor, don't forget, only 26,000 can see Norwich live. There are tens of thousands of us who can't go, and we get a huge kick from watching our team on TV. Exactly, yeah, and of course that's taken into account as well. There are some people who have probably watched more Norwich City games this year because they've all been available to consume than maybe they have in any other years, overseas or otherwise. So there's that element to it as well. Neil Lufer has said, any news of Mario and Alex Tettey getting a contract extension? All seems very quiet on that front, Pad.
Yeah, I must confess I haven't followed up. Get Dan Hawker back on here. We'll get him on live. He might be able to give us an inside track on that. But this week, no. But last week, I think I put that to. It might even be the week before now. I put it to Daniel, and his thoughts was we're in this really congested period, and we had to get past that before you could actually sit down with these guys and have serious conversations. If I had £1 and I was going to put it somewhere, I'd say probably now it's certainly with Alex probably leaning towards maybe it's going to be 8 or 9 years and over and out. I think I don't see really the value in getting him another year in the Premier League. A great servant that he's been. And Mario, for me, Mario's a little bit in the Marco Stiepermann camp. he said he had interest last summer, but he actually wanted to stay and get Norwich back in the Premier League. So if he fancies trying to prove that he can operate at that level, then you'd think he'd want to stay on the ride. But he's the other side of 30 now. Daniel talks about he's not getting any younger periodically. Does he want to maybe go and get one decent payday somewhere else and maybe play a few more games? So, yeah, Alex, I think, is probably I'll be amazed if there's a new deal on the table for Alex Tettey. But obviously, this will be confirmed in due course. I'm sure the club will be pretty swift as soon as the outstanding issues on the pitch have been resolved. Because ultimately, if it is goodbye for Alex, I'm sure, again, we talked way at the outset about marking achievements of promotion and title. Well, if it is the end of Alex Tettey, I'm sure the club would want to mark that as well, because he's given superb service to the football club, hasn't he? And Mario, less so in terms of longevity, but let's no one forget this time 2 seasons ago, it was that man and that man alone who dragged Norwich over the line, really, with those wonderful displays against Sheffield Wednesday and Aston Villa. And his impact in the Farker era, first signing, I think, Daniel's first signing, if not mistaken. So that would be a break with the Farker era. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if it's probably those two moving on, because as we saw with, and all right, they haven't moved on, but in terms of the decision to move on with them on the pitch, Leitner and Tom Tribal, there was no sentiment at all shown to them two guys this time last summer. So if Webber and Farker don't feel they can add enough value, then they won't be on the ride. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, it does feel like there's going to be less sentiment this time around it. Of course, last time they tried to do it, and you remember that 11 they named against Liverpool, and it was all players that had been involved the previous season, wasn't it? As opposed to sort of embedding those new additions that they got. Certainly get the sense that maybe there's going to be less of that this time, and perhaps a bit more of a ruthless touch. A few more comments. Let's see what we have on here. Barry Young, there might be a celebration at Carrow tomorrow night. I certainly don't get the impression that maybe fans will gather. That's certainly not what I sense anyway, just because of obviously what Norwich fans had 2 years ago. They tend to be fairly sensible anyway. I can't see it in, say, the same way we saw Leeds and Rangers celebrations, I guess, but that was such a significant achievement for those two clubs, wasn't it? And it's not like Norwich haven't experienced that in recent years. Let's see what else we've got here. Rob Garnham, if Barnsley don't go up and we do, should we send Ida on loan there next season? Would fit in a treat. Well, Daniel was asked about Adam Ida today, wasn't he, in terms of it was right at the end of the press conference in terms of minutes and how he wanted to see him end the season. Where do you kind of feel Norwich are with Adam Ida? Because they're clearly rating him very highly. Daniel Farker could have sent him out on loan last summer. He's still, I guess, in that sort of difficult position where this season injuries probably have prevented him making a bit more of a claim, and then of course Norwich is stepping up as well. So is he going to be one of the strikers that Norwich City head into the Premier League with, or do you think there is going to be maybe a conversation about him going out on loan potentially to the Championship next season?
Well, it's such a difficult balancing act, because ultimately you've got if you want to call it, the welfare of the player and what's right for the player's development, but also ultimately Norwich need to have a squad that's competitive enough to cope with sort of injuries, suspensions, and good enough quality to sort of get points. Particularly if we're talking Premier League level, there has to be a premium on quality, and that guy has had a very disrupted season for one reason or another this time round. Now, whether that's setting back in the eyes of Farker and Webber, and now he needs to go out and play Championship football or play regular football somewhere, time will tell. I think personally with him, that'll be tied to what they do. And we won't pronounce his name again, but in terms of the striker situation, I think if, say, hypothetically, that lad came in and you've got Pookie and you've got Hugo, then, unless Daniel's going to suddenly start playing two up top, you probably don't need Adam Ida in the building, and he'd be better off going and playing football. But I don't see those type of decisions happening with the likes of him, Barley Momba, Josh Martin, until, almost we're at the back end of the transfer window and probably the season's up and running, and you can see exactly how the land lies. I'd be amazed if any of those, very early on in pre-season are being farmed out, a bit like Ollie Skip was from Tottenham. So, yeah, but, there probably is a compelling case that he needs to go and play football now. He's had a season where it's been a holding pattern for him, and having, made the breakthrough in that FA Cup at Preston, and then he got a few minutes in the Premier League. He will probably feel his career not through no fault of his own. He's had his injuries. He obviously was diagnosed with coronavirus as well, but it has stalled on the pitch in terms of his minutes this season. And now he's obviously injured again and just literally back in training the last day or two. So yeah, I think for me, the measure is probably tipping towards getting him out and getting him some game time. I think, because can you see him really realistically? We'll take that. Yeah. I'll get on the phone to Mark Robbins and we'll see if we can get into Coventry. I'll definitely take him there. They've got Des Walker's son. We're going off on a tangent here. Tyler Walker. He's playing up top for them at the minute. So, yeah, that's a good shout. That I'll get on to Dan Hawker when I get off here and see if we can arrange that. But no, I think with Adam, he needs to play. He ultimately needs to play. We know the potential is there, but it's a big ask to expect him to take a leading role on in the Premier League, and certainly ahead of Pookie, ahead of even Hugo, and potentially another signing. So for me, yeah, I think time to get him out on loan.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. I think you Todd Cantwell made this comment in the official club podcast that he did, and it's a valid one, that Norwich get promoted, and that kind of drags everyone up, doesn't it? Because suddenly players that maybe would sort of ordinarily go on loan to League One clubs now are suddenly getting Championship moves because Norwich have that Premier League tag. So it kind of drags everyone forward, doesn't it? So maybe that's going to be the case for Adam Edo, and you would expect him to get a fairly decent loan in the Championship if that is the case. Ben has said, can you walk us through those folded clothes? That's poor from me, actually. I didn't realise I actually had folded clothes in the background. A couple of them are blankets, to be fair, but yeah, that is poor from me. So yeah, my bad. Sorry about that. Again on Periscope, 44 Elwell has said how many. It was very nice earlier, so I'll ask that question. How many of the big guns could we potentially use? Pad, what do you think?
Well, your point I thought was valid. It's how it projects onto your fan base. If you were, to sanction and we're talking big guns, let's throw them out there. Aarons, Buendia, Cantwell. Can't think of any others that would fit the criteria above those three. Now, you lose two out of those three, then it doesn't send that message that we're looking to come up and have a right good crack, better than we did 2 seasons ago. And I don't think that's inside the club where their heads at. I think they do really want to, having navigated their way through the huge challenges of the pandemic and on the cusp of being back in the Premier League and all the revenue that should allow them to tap into. They've said on record, Zoe Ward, didn't she do that Zoom there about 6 weeks back, and said they're not under any pressure to sell any players this summer financially. So if that is the case, then I think it should be additions. And we've already seen with Yanulis and Gibson, the groundwork's already in place. Those 2 deals will be confirmed. That's the thick end of £15 million. It feels like Norwich are actually going to be more active in terms of adding to the squad than losing players. The only way those scenarios happen with the crown jewels, if you want to call them that, is, as I say, and I use Aarons again, if he feels the time is right this summer now, that, he stayed last season, he's played his part, got Norwich back up, thanks, but now maybe my horizons are slightly higher. No disrespect to Norwich, and I don't think any Norwich fan worth their salt would begrudge him a move to a top 6 type size club, really, either home or abroad. So, yeah, for me, if you could limit it, if you kept Buendia and Aarons went and Campbell stayed in the building, I think most Norwich fans would probably take that, wouldn't they? Because the fear would be that you lose 2 or heaven forbid, all 3 of those, and then it's a very, very difficult task to try and replace that quality with sufficient quality for the fees that they'll be able to pay. So, but in Webber, I was going to say Farker, but we know it's Stuart Webber who's got his hand on the recruitment tiller. I'd basically say place your trust in that man. He knows, because he admitted it openly. He got it wrong 2 summers ago. He didn't get the recruitment right. Okay, they didn't have the finances really to take too many gambles, but he was open enough to admit they got it wrong. The sort of character he is, I'm sure he wants to prove that he can go and have a much better window. And if they do that this summer, and that's both keeping their better players, or the majority of them, and then adding quality, then to me they look set to at least have a good go this time around. I think most Norwich fans would take that, wouldn't they? I might be wrong, but I would think if they really, really had a go at trying to stay up, then, and ultimately it didn't happen, then you go back down with far fewer regrets than they would have had in the Project Restart era, I'm sure.
Yeah, two final questions. What I would just add to what you said there, this is a very difficult market, I think, for a lot of clubs that maybe won't necessarily have the money that maybe Norwich City will want for some of those players because of the effects of COVID. We still don't really know what effect that is going to have on the market in that basis. And then on top of that, No, I've completely lost the second point I was going to make, but I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. Ben has asked, do you chaps think every game should be streamed in the UK from now on, even with a full capacity stadium? What do you think about that, Pad? It's quite an interesting point, isn't it? It feels like that anyway in the Premier League to some extent, I would argue.
Isn't that pretty much the case? Yeah, that's not a topic I must confess I've looked down into too deeply. Obviously pertinent now because that's really how a lot of fans have been able to consume, with the iFollow platform primarily, but obviously when it's been on, as it will be tomorrow night on Sky. But I'm pretty sure in the Premier League, you can. Yeah, maybe I'm getting into illegal streams. Maybe I shouldn't get down that avenue, but I'm sure you can. I'm sure you're pretty much able to sort of get Premier League football if you look hard enough. Let's put it that way. So, but whether funny enough, I was driving back from somewhere yesterday, and then there was a discussion about cricket and how Channel 4 had a few of the Test matches this summer for the first time on terrestrial TV in 16 years, and how that grows the sport. I think there is a debate, but when you're talking the billions of pounds in TV deals that are involved in football, it's very hard to see whether the broadcasters would agree to whether it was the terrestrial element or whether it was just making them all readily available. So for me, I would imagine, I don't know how many years we've got left in the current TV cycle deal, but nothing will change in this deal because those pillars are already in place, aren't they, in terms of which each broadcaster has got X amount of games and the time slots they've got on around a match weekend. So it'd have to be the next TV cycle, whenever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Pad, we'll just finish then with how you see tomorrow going. Of course, as we've mapped out right at the start of this, Norwich can secure their promotion with a win, regardless of what happens elsewhere. Of course, various permutations. That means it could be done before then. So in many ways, I'm sort of asking for two predictions, as I did on Terrace Talk, which is quite strange, which is one being that if Norwich are promoted at lunchtime, and one, or about 2:30, and one if they aren't, because I think they're two different circumstances to consider. So how do you see the game going depending on obviously those situations?
Yeah, well, look, I'll go right back to what I said at the start. I just feel I can't see Swansea and Brentford winning. I mean, you've seen the start. Yes, they both won last weekend, but that probably is the first time in, I don't know, since Norwich got knocked off top spot, since they lost at Swansea, that both have actually won on the same day or the same weekend. I just feel the nature of the Championship, the nature of how tough those teams have found it to get that winning consistency. I just see Millwall maybe coming to Brentford and getting a result. And if that is the case, then, as we've established, a point would do it for Norwich. So, yeah, I think ultimately, for me, it'll happen at Carrot Road in the evening, but it might only need a point. And, that would be quite a relaxed scenario to be in, because I think they've got more than enough to get the point they need against Bournemouth. Yes, they've picked up of late. They've got some very good attacking players. I like Brooks. I think he's an outstanding player. But ultimately, if you said to them, Norwich lads, at 5 to 8 as they're in the Carrow Road tunnel about to go out, you need a point to get to the Premier League, I think that's all the motivation they're going to need.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm struggling, I must admit, to foresee a situation where if it's not done by 2:30, that Norwich aren't in a position that is done by about 10 o'clock, to be honest. I think if that is mapped out, and they will know, won't they? It's not like all these games are happening at the same time, so they will know what they need to do. So if it is the fact that they need a win, then it is very difficult, I think, in that situation with the prize that is going to be played for, to foresee a Norwich City loss. So yeah, if they need a point, I think they'll probably get a point. If they need a win, I think they'll get a win. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And of course, throughout the weekend, we'll be reacting to all the various scenarios, in which case it doesn't happen tomorrow, and in which case it might be it won't be a silent weekend, but maybe a slightly different weekend to what we have planned. So keep it locked to all of our channels, our website, all of that good stuff, And of course, myself, Paddy, and Dave will be at Carrow Road tomorrow evening. Whatever happens, I think we'll have our team news video. We may have a live video before that if it's all done and dusted. We'll see what transpires. Various bits of content coming your way across the weekend. Paddy, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you again very, very soon.